Okay, this is 5.8 impacts of overfishing. So our goal is by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe causes of and problems related to overfishing. And we're going to do this by looking at some examples of where overfishing has occurred. So let's start by defining overfishing. So overfishing occurs when fish are caught faster than they can reproduce to replace themselves. So remember we talked about with the human population, replacement fertility. If we're fishing faster than the fish's replacement fertility rate, then we're going to see a decrease in the amount of fish. And we're going to talk about these in terms of the word fisheries, which is the populations of fish used for commercial fishing, and the term fishery collapse, which is when overfishing causes 90% of a population to decline in a fishery. So the problems with fishery collapse is that a population may never recover from this collapse because of the decrease in biodiversity. Remember we talked about populations that are really small. Remember those glossy black cockatoos down to just a few individuals decreases that biodiversity. There's also an inability to find mates, and then there's going to be a problem with inbreeding. So inbreeding depression, fewer individuals, they may be more closely related, and over time you're going to see more genetic diseases pop up in these populations. So this graph shows the Northwest Atlantic cod production, which is basically in our backyard, Cape Cod and up to Nova Scotia. We can see they reached their peak in the late 1960s and then suffered a massive fishery collapse, which has dwindled to almost no fisheries, no fish left, and the fishery here is basically gone. So the decreased genetic diversity of the fish populations and ocean ecosystems if we lose a species, so all those species that rely on the Atlantic cod as food or the prey of the Atlantic cod are going to suffer from loss of biodiversity as well. Additionally, there's an economic consequence, the loss of the income for the fishermen and those tourism dollars related to going on fishing tours and fishing trips. So this has been a widespread problem. Here are some headlines, even recently, of our fishery collapses. Sardinella fishery collapse, cod, yellowfin tuna. Okay, so let's talk about the big issue here, and that is the fact that fishing technology is outpacing fish reproduction. So in the last 50 years, our technology has increased dramatically. So originally there's hand line fishing where you're just using a fishing line and a hook to catch fish. Not terribly efficient, but it's much safer. You catch fewer fish, but that's better for the fish population. We've now evolved to really effective methods of fish catching that are so effective that they're damaging the fish population. And one of those is called bottom trawling. So bottom trawling is harmful because you drag a large net along the ocean floor. It's not picky, it's going to pick up whatever's there. So you get a lot of bycatch. These are our unintended species that get caught. In particular, this is things like dolphins, whales, and turtles. And it also stirs up the ocean sediment. We call this the turbidity of the ocean. And it will destroy any coral reef structures because, again, you're just dragging a net along the bottom, catching everything you can. This is really common with the cod fishery because they tend to be bottom-dwelling fish, and it's quite a big problem. So we're having an effect what's called fishing down the food chain. And what this means is we're depleting these large predatory fish, and over time as we get rid of the larger fish, we're moving to smaller and smaller and smaller fish. So taking smaller fish impacts the ability of the fishery to recover because those smaller fish are usually the future reproductive generation. So if we're taking out that reproductive generation, they cannot replace themselves. Additionally, taking these fish decreases the food left over for marine mammals and seabirds, and it causes a whole host of ecosystem issues up and down the food chain. So one example I wanted to mention about fishing down the food chain and what's available left to fish is the difference in swordfish size between this prized swordfish that was 1,100 pounds versus swordfish today, which are significantly smaller because we're not allowing them to get that big. And they're struggling to catch up in their population recovery based upon our overly efficient fishing technologies. So our goal was to describe causes of and problems related to overfishing, and the summary here is that fishing technology is rapidly increasing, allowing fishermen to catch increasing quantities of fish in less time, which does not allow the fishery time to recover, leading to a total collapse of our fisheries.